The fact that Margaret Atwood said that nothing in this book is something that hasn't happened, I think of some of those scenes and I'm like, oh my God, that happened somewhere. Like people were doing that.
Books and Brunch with Amber and Noelle.
Hi, welcome to Books and Brunch. I'm Noelle.
I'm Amber. Today we are going to be reviewing Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I had read this book before, loved it. I wanted Noelle to experience it. I'm very interested to see what her take was. I got her on the Margaret Atwood train back when we read Oryx and Crake, which we have those episodes. There's 2 episodes on that one. You can check those out. If you are not aware of who Margaret Atwood is, she's a genius and she's really funny. She does a lot of interviews, like, at Harvard and all these different places. And she's really funny for being as intelligent and successful she is. She has this witty little humor. So I recommend looking up some of her videos. She was born in 1939. She's 84 years old, or she's about to be 84. Her birthday's in November.
Honestly, she looks amazing.
Yeah. I can only ever hope to model myself after Margaret Atwood. She's Canadian, and she is a poet, novelist, literary critic, essayist, teacher, environmental activist, and inventor, which I'll get to in a minute what she has invented, and it's very cool. Since 1961, she has published 18 books of poetry, 18 novels, 11 books of nonfiction, 9 collections of short fiction, 8 children's books, 2 graphic novels, and a number of small press editions of both poetry and fiction. She's won numerous awards and honors for her writing. She's won 2 Booker Prizes, the Arthur C. Clarke Award, the Governor General's Award, the Franz Kafka Prize, Princess of Asturias Awards, and the National Book Critics and Penn Center USA Lifetime Achievement Awards. She graduated from Victoria College, the University of Toronto, in 1961 with a Bachelor of Arts in English and minors in philosophy and French.
Me too! Sorry.
Y'all are two
Those
peas
were
in a pod.
literally, that's my majors. Okay, sorry.
Really?
Not
How funny.
French. But
Oh. I was I had no idea you spoke French. In 1961, she began her graduate studies at Radcliffe College of Harvard University with a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship.
wow.
She obtained a master's degree from Radcliffe in 1962 and pursued doctoral studies for 2 years, but did not finish her dissertation, which was the English Metaphysical Romance. She has honorary degrees from 25 universities and colleges, and her work has been of interest to feminist literary critics despite her unwillingness to apply the label feminist to her works. So, starting with the publication of her first novel, which was The Edible Woman, she said, "I don't consider it feminism, I just consider it social realism." So, fun facts. I said she's an inventor. So she invented something called the long pen device. So
Okay, so long writing utensil pen.
yeah,
long
LONGPEN, all
Okay.
one word. That facilitates remote robotic writing of documents. She conceived this in 2004, debuted it in 2006, and it allows a person to write remotely in ink anywhere in the world via tablet, PC, and the internet and a robotic hand. It also supports an audio and video conversation between the endpoints, such as a fan and author while a book is being signed. The system was used by Conrad Black, who was under arrest to attend a book signing event without leaving his home. Someone could be in one place and sign stuff in another location.
With literal ink, not just, not you can e-sign a PDF. It's like an actual robot hand that is signing with real ink. Wow.
Another fun fact, she has claimed that, according to her grandmother, the 17th century witchcraft lynching survivor, Mary Webster, might have been one of their ancestors. And Mary is the subject of Atwood's dedication in her novel, The Handmaid's Tale.
I don't know if you can see it. It says, for Mary Webster and Perry Miller.
Nice. So that's just a little bit about Margaret Atwood.
She just seems to churn out bangers. Just Just a good book after another. So what we read, Oryx and Crake, when was that published? Do you remember?
That was one of her more recent books.
I had a lot of thoughts comparing the two of them together, thinking about one being an earlier work and one being almost like a building on this futurist nihilism, maybe futurist realism that she kind of uses in her books that give it that sci-fi element, but manage to like avoid the gadgety, techie kind of traditional sci-fi tropes. I literally sat and I was underlining things and being like, ooh, in Oryx and Crake, she takes this idea even further. Different writers have ideas that they are constantly ruminating about. And if you look from the beginning of their works until later, you almost see them working out issues.
And she follows a lot of like similar themes of something in the world has changed, some cataclysmic event, and then how humans are reacting to it. And in The Handmaid's Tale, she wanted to make sure everything she put in there, it was all things that had actually happened somewhere in the world. So when she wrote it, she was living in Berlin and the wall was still up.
Right.
And
the wall is featured heavily in that, not the Berlin Wall, but this idea of the wall.
Right, and that's actually a wall at Harvard that she based that on. So Handmaid's Tale is about a time in the future when populations have gone down in the United States, and they blame it on like microplastics and viruses and different things. And so our population is decreasing, and there is a sort of a coup of these very religious people, or they're not even necessarily religious, but they use religion as a way to get followers and then to overthrow the government. And so you're in the US, you have a new controlling force that base everything on basically the Old Testament. And
really quick side note, what happened initially, if I'm remembering correctly, is there was a terrorist attack where Islamic extremists killed everyone in the government, and so they temporarily suspended the Constitution. Because I remember underlining that and being like, holy crap, like how, I mean, think about September 11th. This was written in the 80s. There was already tensions in the Middle East, but her drawing on that and imagining this world in which a terrorist attack allows the government to suspend the Constitution, you know?
Yeah, very slippery slope. There's reasons we have things in place to keep all this from happening. That all gets suspended. New group is put in place. And because women are having a hard time having babies, or a lot of babies that they have die shortly after or severely deformed, they take women who have previously, before this change in government happened, these women had children who were healthy, so they put them in a facility and train them how to be handmaids. Which
is essentially just like a surrogate.
Not really. A surrogate goes through like in vitro. It's not actually her baby. And
okay, you're right.
And she's like, willing.
They're like a rent-a-womb.
Our main character, which is never named, she's never given, her real name is never named.
Right.
But in the book she's Offred, and so it's of Fred, because her man, she's in his house, his name is Fred. The book goes back and forth in time, her in this facility with the training, which it's abusive. None of these women have volunteered to be there.
It actually reminded me of boot camp a lot.
Really? Yeah.
Weren't they in like an old gymnasium, like a high school gymnasium?
An old school, yeah, and their classes were in the gym. And then it goes back to where, she's with her husband and daughter, and then it goes to the present time where she's in this house as a handmaid. So despite her distaste for literary labels, Atwood has since conceded to referring to The Handmaid's Tale as a work of science fiction, or more precisely, speculative fiction. As she has repeatedly noted, there is a precedent in real life for everything in the book. I decided not to put anything in that somebody somewhere hadn't already done. So just keep that in mind as you're reading this book. And then in an interview with Penguin Books, she stated that the driving question throughout her writing of this was, if you were going to shove women back into the home and deprive them of all of these gains that they've thought they have made, how would you do it? Then in 2018, following a partnership between Hulu's adaptation and the women's rights organization Equality Now, she was honored at their 2018 Make Equality Reality Gala. And in her acceptance speech there, she said, I am, of course, not a real activist. I'm simply a writer without a job who is frequently asked to speak about subjects that would get people with jobs fired if they themselves spoke. You, however, at Equality Now are real activists. I hope people will give Equality Now lots and lots of money today so that they can write equal laws, enact equal laws, and see that equal laws are implemented. That way, in time, all girls may be able to grow up believing that there are no avenues that are closed to them simply because they are girls. I really like how she said, like, I'm able to say things because no one can fire me. Because a lot of times people who want to speak out, they're like, but then I lose my job, then I lose my home, then, you know, so they're silenced, and she's not.
It's interesting because in The Handmaid's Tale, the main character is also definitely not trying to be an activist. She's not trying to breach any boundaries. She's subversive in the sense that she'll do certain things that are thrilling because they're illegal, but she never does anything like enough to push the envelope. She doesn't get involved politically with like the May Day movement, and even like I feel like Moira and even what is it, Glenn, the other gal down the road, they represent different kind of politically active or rebellious females, where that your main character, your narrator is literally telling you that she's afraid. And even I think Moira calls her a pussy.
Yeah, her motivation is to get back to her daughter or save her daughter, because she did have a child and they took the child and gave it to another family. A lot of the going along with things and not being as rebellious as she could have been was due to that. And then in the series on Hulu, they base it on the book, and then they go kind of like with Game of Thrones, they go further than the book. And then when Margaret Atwood wrote the second book, Testaments, she started where the series left off and wrote that. So then they continued with what she did in her second book. And so you would really like this series because it really gets into more of the, I'm not going to say politics, but the rebelliousness. It takes Offred's story further, and you see what happened to her husband, because in the book you don't know if he got killed or he's captive or what happened, so you find out what happens to him. You find out it's good. I really recommend the series.
I kept thinking she was gonna find him on the wall because it seemed like that's what
she kept looking for him. Yeah, Atwood said that the 2016 United States presidential election led to an increase in sales of The Handmaid's Tale. Amazon reported that it was the most read book of 2017.
Interesting.
It was adapted several times. So there was a 1990 film I did not know about. A musical adaptation resulted in the 2000 opera.
Shut up. Yeah. What a traumatic story to turn into a musical.
Yeah. And then the television series on Hulu in 2018, that included 3 seasons, and she actually appeared in that. She had a cameo in the first episode. She's one of the ants at the Red Center.
I knew you were going to say she was one of the ants.
And then in 2019, a graphic novel based on the book and with the same title was published. And then in 2019, she partnered with Equality Now, that was that one that she was giving this speech at earlier, for the release of The Testaments, which was the follow-up. And on November 28, 2018, she announced that she would publish The Testaments, the sequel, in September of 2019. The novel features 3 female narrators and takes place 15 years after the character Offred's final scene in The Handmaid's Tale. The book was announced as the joint winner of the 2019 Booker Prize. So this is the follow-up book, if you can see that.
Yes.
And I have not read it yet because I wanted to reread. And then, can you see that?
Did she sign that with a robotic hand across?
I don't know, but it's like
FaceTime?
actually signed because I pre-ordered it and everything. And
That's awesome.
I don't remember. It's like first edition. I don't know how much I paid for it.
So one of my favorite things about the book, before we're going to get into the recipe in a second, but one of my favorite things about the book that I found very compelling was this kind of imperfect narration. So you've got, it's different than, it's not that you have an unreliable narrator. She's a reliable narrator, but she self-edits. So she'll tell you something and then say, okay, that's not actually what happened. This is what happened. Or she'll break that fourth wall and be like, I wish I didn't have to tell this story, but this is why I'm telling this story. I love that. I love it so much. It feels like you're reading someone's diary.
Did you read at the very end of the book, it says historical notes on the Handmaid's Tale? Did you read that?
Yeah, no, I didn't.
That's the last chapter.
God
so you
damn
don't know
it.
the end. You don't know the end.
No, I thought it ended, spoiler, with her getting in the van.
No. You
Oh
gotta
my
read that
God.
last chapter.
Oh
Yeah.
my god. I thought it was like an appendix.
I wonder how many. Because there's like a couple blank pages and then it's like historical notes. I wonder how many people have read this book and never read that.
Well, I skimmed through it and I saw stuff about Gileads and Jezebels and goddess cults. And I was like, oh, it must be just about like true things in history that she pulled from that inspired the book.
It gives you one big piece of information, but it still leaves on a cliffhanger.
Do you want to talk about the recipe and the beverage?
Yeah. You want me to go
So-
first or you?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, so this is my recipe. I provide the drink recipes. And this is Red's Hard Cider. I thought this would be really funny if you were doing a book club because they have it's all red and then you could like set them out because the handmaids all wear red. Well, if you get Angry Orchard, they have their same like hard cider, but theirs are all blue. And all the wives were blue. So I was like,
Yep.
that'd be fun if you're putting together a book club. You could do like the red ones and the blue ones and have them
Yes.
set out. I love
But
a theme.
what would the Jezebels drink? Whatever they want.
Vodka.
I went with the apple theme, the fertility theme. There were moments where I was like, oh, let's use some food from the book, but really it was like brown bread, an egg, and a
Yeah.
lettuce sandwich. And I was like, no thanks.
They do have, I looked up because so the book takes place at what used to be Harvard.
Okay.
And so it's like Harvard doesn't, they don't have universities anymore. And so where they live and everything is like Harvard. And actually, I guess that she said that when she first put the book out in the 80s, like Harvard was mad. But now they've like welcomed her and she's done speeches there. And
if
so I
you're
don't
not
know if that
making
was-
people mad with your literature, are you even doing it right?
Yeah, and I don't know if she was joking or if that was serious. But so I looked it up and there is a Harvard cocktail you can make. And, but it
interesting.
had a lot of ingredients and I didn't want to buy all those. So I was like, eh.
Rich people drink.
Yeah, right?
Well, it's funny because in history, whenever in a totalitarian society, when like a dictator is taken over, a lot of times they will move into universities or use old school grounds as like prison camps. Like Pol Pot in Cambodia used middle schools and high schools for all of his like prison camps. And I just think that's really interesting. Same with like in Russia, it's like big universities that were used. Back to the recipe. I made stewed apples. Stewed apples are really easy. You skin your apples, you chop them up into little bite sizes, and you simmer them on a hot plate with water. And you can use, like this recipe that I posted calls for maple syrup, but you can use honey any kind of like sweetener. I like to put cardamom on top of mine with cinnamon. The idea of the apple, I think, is twofold, like when it comes to symbolism with this book, because they bring up time and time again that it was the woman who was tempted, that Adam came first and then Eve. It was Eve who was tempted, and then Eve who pulled Adam into that temptation, and that's almost their whole justification for subordinating women. But the second thing is that the apple also is symbolic of fertility. So fertility is something that is seen as desirable in this society because the population's low. It's the one thing that the handmaids have that the wives don't have. So it's sort of like the apple is sort of this symbol of the handmaids. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we committed some sins. That's why we're in this position. But we have this thing that you wives want, and it's fertility. And you can't have it. We can.
Okay, so that was information on the author, on the book without spoilers, the recipe, and the drink in case you're wanting to do a book club meeting. And now you want to get into discussing the book and have spoilers?
Yes.
Yeah.
From this point on, if you haven't read the book, pause it, come back. If you have read the book, we're going to talk about spoilers.
Would you recommend this book? Did you like it?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely.
I love this book. I think it's got, all of the tension and the what's going to happen, but it's got all of these bizarre ideas, but then going into it knowing that this is all stuff that's really happened to someone somewhere, it kind of blows your mind, and it opens your eyes, especially where we live, just in the US, and it's we take a lot of freedoms for granted. I just love that she has taken her talent and the time to put books like this out, because I think these are the books that mean so much. And this was actually one of the books, I think that it got listed at one point on like the banned books.
Oh,
and
wow.
then a few years ago, she put out an edition of this book that's unburnable.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah, you can't burn it. And
well, that was a big part of, if you've read Fahrenheit 451, 1984, and Brave New World, they all have that book burning. Or even if you've seen the film Equilibrium with Christian Bale, they burn books, they burn art, they burn anything that promotes any kind of creativity, independent thought, things like that. And so even in this book is a little bit more focused on women. So it's like women's magazine. Books aren't all necessarily burned, but women aren't allowed to read them. So men can still read and have access to information, but women can't.
I felt like there was probably a lot of things in this book that got you angry. I was like, oh, I bet Noelle right now is like, what? Like the way that they impregnate them.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't. I never felt angry. I felt
really.
I felt curious. Like I found myself being like, how would we react? Like for one of the first things, I think the first moment that I felt like my heart rate elevated was when you find out back when things were normal in society, and then just one day they turned off all the women's money cards,
their debit cards,
cards in their bank. And you're like, what? And then all women got fired from their jobs, and it like all happened like boom, like these universal, just like across the board. And talk about like that feeling, like what would you do?
Yeah, well, and I think that having this wide system of drastic change has always felt just like unbelievable. And then COVID hit, and then the government put all these rules into place. In New Mexico, our rules were pretty strict, and you saw how with the flip of a switch everything changed and everybody went with it. And I remember my husband went to the grocery store, and there was a man out there, and he had 6 state cops around him because he didn't have a mask on in the store, and he was trying to tell them that he had a health condition, like it was hard to breathe, or I don't know what his condition was, But they brought in like 6 people in the parking lot around him, like 6 state troopers, because he didn't have a mask on in the store. You get military or whoever, people who are in charge.
Right.
If they all agree to enforce something, then everybody's sort of at their mercy. And so
Well, that's sort of what are you familiar with Milgram's experiments? Milgram did the shock experiments, where he had a group of actors in one room and then separated by glass, and then a group of real people in one room. And the real people were asking questions to the actors that they did not know were actors, hooked up to an electroshock unit. And every time they got an answer wrong, they would shock them. And every subsequent wrong answer, they would turn up the voltage. The actors got to the point where they were screaming, fainting. A couple of them even acted like they were dead. And the real people pressing the shock button, thinking that they're really doing this, would look to the person conducting the experiment and being like, should I keep going? And when they were told, yep, it's fine, they would just keep going. And the idea is, I think he called it the experiment on control, is that when someone else is taking responsibility, or someone in an authoritative position tells you that it's okay, a lot more people than you would think will do stuff that they wouldn't normally do.
We're trained at such a young age that you don't go against authority. You know, like, you do what your teacher says, you do what your coach says, you do the adult, you respect your adults. You like that show, What Would You Do? Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
They put up a hidden camera and they have actors create like a scenario, and they'll be like a bystander. So they'll be like in a park, and you know, you have this person who doesn't know it's all set up, sitting on a bench, you know, reading a book or whatever. And you'll have like a kid, and then you'll have like someone who's obviously kind of creepy coming up to the kid, and like in earshot of the person on the bench, you know, oh, can you help me find my dog? Can you, you know, like,
yeah.
And they see, will this person actually be like, hey, you know, who are, and come forward and like help the kid?
Yeah.
Or are they just like, that's none of my business?
They did the Stanford prison experiments too back in the 80s, 70s or 80s. And they basically just, you know, took a group of college students and they said, okay, you guys for this month or whatever are prisoners and you guys are guards. And they treated the prisoners they took away all of their privileges. They had to be accounted for and supervised at all times. The guards had no supervision. They could get away with everything. And they actually had to stop the experiment after only a few days because some of the prisoners were having like mental breakdowns because the guards took the fake power that they even knew it was just like an experiment to their heads so much that they were like abusing their classmates. So it's like there is something about power that corrupts certain types of people, certain personalities. What's interesting in The Handmaid's Tale is there are moments where the narrator even looks at Luke, the man that she's married to before, in the before times, and like when they freeze her bank account and fire her from her job, she won't argue with him because she knows she needs him. She doesn't want there to be any issues because he now controls her money. He is her only, what she thinks is like lifeline, her survival. And so it's like in a situation like that, she even said at one point that she thought that he kind of relished that power just a little bit. And I was like, that's a really interesting dynamic to think about. Okay, here's a good question. Do you think that there's tension between two conflicting ideologies within the story?
Yeah. I think that's the story, right?
Well, I think not so much the obvious of like total control versus freedom, but maybe within the narrator herself. Do you think there are two conflicting ideologies that she has within her that creates tension?
Yeah, I think she's really she's just really conflicted because to stay alive, you have that survivor mentality of just do what you need to do, follow the rules, do this, but then she has, you know, memories of how things used to be, and then whenever she starts hooking up with Nick she's putting herself now in danger because she likes that experience. But then she also feels guilty about being with Nick because Luke, she doesn't know what he's going through.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think
It's
she has
almost,
a lot of different.
I think that there is an interesting kind of focus on what guilt and or shame means, like what it meant in the before times and what it means in the after time. And I think guilt and shame becomes almost this thing that she likes in the later times because it makes her feel alive. You know, it makes her feel like less
like
in
a
her
puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she's almost proud of herself for doing things that could cause her to feel guilt, because that means she's not just doing whatever they want. She's got some free will, or not free will. It's
Well,
not free.
Yeah, and it's different because so when you see Moira in the second half of the book as a Jezebel, when she's snuck into that little underground club, you realize that Moira's lost her fight, right? She's lost all of her fight because she's now in this class of women who they can do whatever they want within reason, but they still have no power. They neutered Moira. They gave her just enough that she can drink, she can do drugs, she has access to women. She doesn't have to be a wife or an unwoman or a handmaid. So she's in like this other class. Into her, she's like, I'm fine. At least I'm not like in the game, right? Like at least I'm not playing the game. And it's like, yeah, but now these indiscretions or these transgressive acts you're doing aren't transgressive anymore because they were almost government issued, right? So the best way to take the power away from someone doing something subversive is to like legalize it and to be like, no, I give you permission to do whatever you want. And then now, where's their fight? Whereas there's where that, I think that moment in the club, they almost trade places in a sense that Alfred is the one who is being transgressive, is being subversive. The commander's given her all these opportunities to be transgressive, but he's given them to her, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I want to take something that's wrong on my own. And I like that even though the wife, Serena Joy, arranges for her to sleep with Nick, the fact that she continues to go behind everybody's back, now that means she's not only transgressing against the commander, but she's transgressing against the wife and society. Not that it is real power, but she found a way to feel powerful in her situation.
I think with Moira at the little prostitution ring they've got going, it's another survival mode. You know, she's like, I'm either a handmaid, I'm this, or I get sent to the colonies, or they just kill me. You know, it's like they have to look at, these are my options, and of these options, which one is like the lesser evil? You know, like, which one can I deal with better? And like, none of these are good.
Which one has the least amount of suffering
Happening.
Think about how crazy people are with their political extremism, like far, far left, far, far right. That's the new religion of the state, right? So you could see one extreme side or the other creating a kind, like dismantling the government and building one that is built on just the beliefs of one extreme side. We need to get rid of humans and just all be children of Crake. That's the future I want.
That's from
I just want my
Crake.
my big blue belly, so everyone knows when I'm ovulating.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Crakers are the perfect people. No fighting, no jealousy. Just
Have you read The Time Machine?
By H.G. Wells?
Mm-hmm.
1,000,000 years ago.
Okay, well, that's what happens when you have Crakers. The ones that live above ground,
Oh man, I gotta reread it because I'm like, I have no idea.
I love that book.
Okay, I'm gonna have to reread that. I know I've got a copy.
It's a good lesson of what happens when you don't have work, when you don't have a purpose or something to do, something to accomplish. What happens to you as a person?
I feel like I'm going through that right now. I don't know what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
It's funny, we were in the car and I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. My son, who's 11, is like, he's 12. Oh my gosh. My son, who's 12, was like, you're already grown. I'm like, I still don't know though.
Yeah. It's like,
do I just give up? I just give up, lie down and die? So, okay, do we want to talk about what's coming up next?
Yeah, which is kind of a hodgepodge. So we've got 2 different authors sent us books to read and review. One is called Spill the Sweet Tea by Lyra Parrish. And it's like a romance novel, small town in Texas. It's very cute, quick read. It's got tarot cards and crystals and bookshop, and it's up there on the level of like Chili Peppers.
The Scoville
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah, it was like, whoa, like
That's
that.
funny.
I learned things like. I was like, okay.
I'm about halfway through Dark Beauty by Blake Rudman.
I started that one.
Rudman. Okay. And it is, I think, kind of like a dark thriller, a story about 2 sisters. They're identical twins. They get kind of wrapped up in the Hollywood LA scene, and things take a really downward spiral. It kind of like, did you ever see Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise?
No.
Okay. Well, there's like Vanilla Sky vibes. So we'll talk about it. It's good.
Yeah. After that, we will finally get to We Share the Night.
Our share of night. Hang on one
Our
second.
share of night.
There it is. Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. She is the author of The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, which was wildly successful. So, yeah, she's considered one of Latin America's most exciting authors.
It is a thick book.
It is a thick book. The font's pretty big in mine. It's like a size 14.
It is like 893 pages.
Sweet. I'm excited. Sorry for the delay. I have been sick, but we're back on it now. And if you've made it through all of this, then you probably already know that we're on Instagram at Books and Brunch Cast. We're also on YouTube, Books and Brunch Cast. You can just type in Books and Brunch book review, type in the book you're looking for, or just pull them all up and you can go through. Our full catalog of episodes in podcast form are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher.
Yeah, and if you go to our Instagram, we have a Linktree link, and it has links to like all the different formats.
Thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Books and Brunch with Amber and Noelle.